Uh-oh. Okay, we'll start with this. It's fight week, folks. It's fight week for Romero, like it's fight week for Flores. The fight between them set to go down on the undercard of Erickson Lubin's fight on Pro Box this weekend. That's going to be going head-to-head with the top-ranked show that El Vaquero is headlining. Less than ideal, because you know that the top-ranked show is likely going to garner more viewership. But at the same time, in this digital era, there's no reason that you can't watch both, that you can have the top-ranked show on your TV and the Pro Box show on your phone. On the undercard of the Pro Box show, WBA Super Bantamweight champion, undefeated Romero will be defending the WBA title for the first time against a live animal in Mexico's own Flores. An underrated rivalry, Mexico versus Argentina. The one you hear more about is Mexico versus Puerto Rico, and at the lower weights in the men's divisions, Mexico versus Japan. Though in the women's game, it's not uncommon for Argentinian fighters to square off against Mexican fighters, since Argentina has long had a well-developed women's boxing scene, and so has Mexico. Both countries, respectively, produce a lot of women boxers. May sound strange to some, but America is just now catching up to those countries in terms of producing women boxers, because they've actually been at it a lot longer. Flores, the challenger, last in action in November of last year opposite the ring Mary Cruz Soto, who she stopped in the 5th round of a contest scheduled for 10. She saw action 2 times last year, once in October, then again in November. No ring rust to shake off. Something similar applies to Romero. It's been less than a year since her big knockout win over Paulette Valenzuela in August of last year. She also fought 2 times last year, once in May, then again in August. Now she's fighting this weekend against Flores in what I think is a 50-50 fight. I wouldn't be surprised if Mayeli won, though officially, I'm going with Nazarena by the slightest of margins. A fight of some consequence. There's a unification match going down in this division in the not-so-distant future. On the undercard of Taylor versus Serrano 3, we're going to be seeing Ali Scotney versus Jamie Mercado for 3 of the 4 major titles at this weight. The one title remaining will be the title that's on the line this weekend, the WBA title that Nazarena will attempt to defend. Then in July, Ali and Jamie will settle up with each other, and whoever wins that fight, which I think is going to be Ali Scotney, will then likely pursue the winner of this weekend's fight. An added incentive for Romero to stay champion on the other side of this fight is likely the most money she will have ever made as a boxer, unifying, fighting the winner of Scotney versus Mercado. And what's interesting is the winner of Scotney versus Mercado is on the same boat if Nazarena wins or if Mayeli wins. Either way it goes, whoever emerges champion this weekend, they're a pressure fighter. Nazarena is a pressure fighter, and Mayeli is a pressure fighter. The fight between them is sure to be fireworks. If Ali Scotney beats Jamie Mercado, like I think she's going to, one way or another, she's gonna have to fight a pressure fighter. Could be Nazarena, could be Mayeli, we'll see. That's how that breaks down. Oftentimes people wonder why I cover the women's game when so many other boxing channels don't. Well, the fights at Times Square this past Friday, and some of the fights in Saudi, it's a big part of why On paper, those fights were intended to deliver a much bigger bang than what we got, whereas a lesser-known fight with lesser-known fighters like these two promises to be much more entertaining than Devin's fight, or Teofimo's fight, or Ryan's fight.
Canelo's fight.
Even his fight was a dud, whereas Romero versus Flores, that won't be.
No, that's gonna be fireworks.
And you can watch it free of charge on YouTube, on ProBox this weekend, on the undercard of Erickson Lubin's IBF Final Eliminator.
Tentatively, I'm going with Nazarena Romero to keep her WBA title, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'm going with Nazarena by way of a points decision. I'm not sure that she knocks Mayeli out. Mayeli's a tough customer and aggressive herself.
But I'm going with Nazarena. Let's see if the prediction sticks. Over to the continued fallout of the Canelo versus Scull fight, what was Canelo's second bid to become an undisputed champion that left a lot of people bored out of their minds and some critical of him. 1988 Eagles fan said, regardless of how much movement Scull was doing, it's still Canelo's fault for not being able to trap his opponent. Canelo went out there and threw 152 total punches, and they broke the record for the least amount of punches thrown that was just set the night before. Neither of them tried.
I disagree with all of that. You can't force a guy to fight, no matter how hard you try. You can't force him to engage.
When a guy makes a decision from the opening bell that he's just fighting to survive, he's really just fighting to not get knocked out.
It's very hard to pin a guy down like that because that's a guy that's willing to lose rounds, lose as many of them as possible so that he doesn't get caught.
Sacrifice the fight in its entirety, not dissimilar from what we saw at 118 when Naoya Inoue fought Paul Butler. Paul Butler was doing the same thing. It took Inoue about 11 rounds to finally get to that guy. Not simply because the fighter's moving, but because the fighter isn't fighting. He isn't even trying. He won't take a chance at throwing a punch.
You're saying William didn't throw any punches?
Not with the intention of landing them. These were not punches that he was sticking out there and committing to. These were not power shots. These were deterrents. Get off of me jabs. Get off of me kind of punches. Nervous punches from a nervous fighter.
He wasn't trying to do any damage because he was too worried about being damaged. It's hard to pin down a negative fighter.
Which has given rise to the sentiment in some circles that Canelo Alvarez is also at fault because he didn't cut off the ring.
Well, that doesn't make it true. That's just what some people are saying.
There's some people that I deduce don't actually know what cutting off the ring is. They've just heard other people say that in a sentence about other fighters and ran with it without understanding what it is to cut off the ring, because if they knew...
Ask them to explain it to you. What exactly is it when you cut off the ring? I bet you they won't have an answer.
I'll bet you they don't know what it is, because like I said, they just heard somebody else say that, and now they parakeet it, thinking they know what they're talking about. If you knew what you were talking about, you would have known Canelo did cut off the ring. You couldn't recognize it because you literally don't know what that is.
You've just heard people talk about it in the context of pinning down a moving target, and you tell yourself, well,
because William Scull stayed on the move the whole time, Canelo didn't cut off the ring.
No, yes he did. He just couldn't force William Scull to engage. So let me give you a bare bones explanation of what cutting off the ring is, since you clearly don't know.
You got an opponent circling away from you, staying on the perimeter of the ring, and instead of following him in a straight line, you move parallel to him.
Go in the same direction he's going.
So that as he's making his way to the adjacent side of the ring, you make a beeline to meet him over there.
And this is where cutting off the ring differs from following the opponent in a straight line.
So that when you meet him over there, maybe you get off 1 or 2 punches, 2 scoring blows. Here's the problem. It's not foolproof. There's nothing stopping that guy from going in the opposite direction, and when he does, you gotta cut off the ring all over again.
Because no matter how many times you cut it off, what you can't do is force him to engage.
If the guy's already made an internal agreement that he's not gonna take any chances and he's not going to engage, there's not a whole lot you can do about that except cut the ring off again and try to land some scoring blows again. As many as you can. Enough that the judges will give you the round.
But it's very difficult to pin down a guy who's willing to sacrifice the round and sacrifice the fight so that he doesn't get hit.
This is a guy who doesn't want to win, and you don't have to take it from me. Take it from Dimitri Bivol.
It was, it's It's not interesting to see the fight when one person doesn't want to win at all. But it was hard fight for Canelo because he was always aiming, and even the Scull didn't throw punches, and it's hard to catch him. He's just moving, but his movement is good, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm not the expert. He is. I just happen to agree with him. That was my evaluation of the fight. William Scull didn't try to win. He didn't want to. He was quite content just circling away from Canelo and surviving the rounds. He tried desperately not to get hit to the point where he was willing to throw the whole fight away.
And a guy like that is very difficult to pin down because he won't engage under any circumstances, even when you are cutting off the ring.
For all the people that claimed Canelo doesn't know how to, he did several times. But you can't force William to throw punches. He's made a decision. He's not going to try to win this thing.
The sweet science snobs who defend any fighter that fights like they've got ants in their pants.
Mistaking boxing for a game of freeze tag or an N1 game, we're not here to see you break your opponent's legs. We're not here to see you pull off a nifty crossover.
You're telling me that Canelo couldn't catch him. I'm wondering, why does he have to?
And for the 36 minutes that William Scull spent on his bike circling away from Canelo, you're telling me that he was trying to catch him?
Oh, he was trying to catch Canelo?
Seen so many people use that cockamamie style of boxing against Canelo Alvarez and watched them fail so many times to elicit the same reactions from the same people that really think boxing is freeze tag.
No matter how many times they see, that shit don't work.
This is how you expect to beat Canelo Alvarez, by playing keep away from him for 36 minutes.
Let me go ahead and do the same shit that Lara did. That didn't work. Same shit that Caleb Plant did, Billy Joe Saunders. Didn't work for them, didn't work for Edgar. It didn't work for Jermell. That's what I'm gonna do.
Why is there always a group of guys defending this very nervous style of fighting, if you even want to call it fighting?
I don't know. I don't care. It's not particularly effective if you're limited to being the outboxer, and frankly, it doesn't make for good television. I'm of the opinion those kind of guys shouldn't even be on a televised portion of a show.
Stay an outboxer too long, you end up like Sky Nicholson did with Tiaria Brown. Stay an outboxer too long, you end up like William Scull did with Canelo. Do you think they're scoring these rounds based on how many laps you do around the ring?
They're not. But William knows they're not. He didn't go in there to win. He went in there to survive, getting a career-high purse in the process for risking nothing.
Before the fight, he said he was going to eat Canelo Alvarez alive. Something along those lines. Is that what you call that? Is that what he tried to do?
And so Canelo Alvarez becomes the undisputed super middleweight champion for the second time in his career, albeit in lackluster fashion. Should we expect the same survivalist mentality from Terence Crawford in September? Terence Crawford, who flew from New York to Saudi.
He flew from the Times Square show in New York to Saudi Arabia to be ringside to scout Canelo Alvarez. Should we expect a William Scull-esque performance from him? A few passing thoughts.
The rumors are true. It would seem that Dana White, via TKO Promotions, is going to be at the helm of the promotion for this show that is set to land on Netflix,
satisfying this growing urge from the colossal platform to host the biggest of the big fights, the biggest of the big live events. Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, Taylor versus Serrano 3, and Canelo versus Crawford in September.
Why Netflix and why TKO?
At the end of the day, it is Turki El Sheikh bankrolling this fight. He's the one that's paying to make it happen and using it as a launch pad to launch the TKO brand and familiarize everybody with it. Now, I don't necessarily think that Dana White is the man for the assignment, the man for the job. Promoting a show this size,
he may be out of his depth, and that's reality. He understands his UFC and that core demographic, but this is boxing, and for you to promote your first boxing match, as it were, under TKO, for it to be this one, this is a lot.
Perhaps too much for a novice. Will Terence Crawford go in there and fight negative, like William Scull did, and so many others before him? And I don't think so. I don't.
Now, Crawford and Canelo's announced, and that's going to live up to the hype. And you know why that's going to live up to the hype? Because them dudes, they from a different cloth. You think Crawford is gonna run from Canelo? You think Crawford's not gonna be competitive? You think Crawford's not gonna try to win that fight? You think Crawford's not gonna try to strive for greatness? Yeah, he get in the bag. But at the end of the day, that dude's a real dog. He a fighter. And so is Canelo. Them dudes is gonna rumble.
I agree with Gabe. Where some people think that Terence Crawford is just showing up for a check to fight a similar fight to the fight that William Scull just fought, I'm of the opinion that Terence's strategy might be more akin to Floyd Mayweather's strategy back at junior middleweight when he fought Canelo so many years ago to what these outboxers have been doing. And so often, Floyd's strategy in that fight is misinterpreted.
Coupled with what Erislandy Lara did or what William Scull just did, when that's not the fight that Floyd Mayweather fought. Floyd Mayweather stayed with Canelo Alvarez mid-range to be close enough to counter him, but far enough out that he can stay out of harm's way.
Floyd didn't spend 36 minutes running from Canelo Alvarez. He stayed with him mid-range to inside, countering on the inside, rolling and countering, slipping and countering, which you can't do way out there on the perimeter of the ring. You have to stay with him.
And I believe that Terence Crawford means to, and that's what his strategy is going to be based on, because even though he's the smaller fighter moving up in weight, look at the height differential.
He's about an inch or two taller than Canelo, and we know he's got more wingspan than Canelo. He's got longer arms to where he can stay mid-range, just close enough to land the punches and land the counters, but if he steps out, he can be out of range of Canelo's. At least, that's what he's thinking.
Where this situation is different to when Floyd Mayweather fought Canelo is a much more experienced fighter than he was when he fought Floyd. That was many, many years and many, many fights ago.
There's no catch weight. There are no weight stipulations in association with this fight like there were when he fought Canelo.
Terence Crawford is actually older now than Floyd Mayweather was then when he fought Canelo. Floyd was 36. Terence is 38. The night of, he will have been inactive for roughly a year's time. So there are many differences there. That might be a strategy, but the situation is not exactly the same. And Floyd didn't jump up 2 weight classes to fight Canelo like he's about to.
Floyd only moved up 1 from welter up to junior middle, where he'd fought before.
Where Terence has never fought at super middle. So he might have the right game plan, the right strategy in mind based on that fight, but there are many differences between then and now, from that fight to this one.
So it doesn't mean it's gonna work, but for anybody who's worried that Terence Crawford is just showing up for a check, like William Scull did this past Saturday, I don't think so. I think he's coming to fight. Whether or not he has the right game plan, only time can tell.
But I don't think he's coming to run. I don't think he's coming to stay on the perimeter of the ring, surviving Canelo for 36 minutes. By now, everybody knows Terence Crawford's got a dog in him, and he likes to fight.
For better or worse, he wants to rumble. And I believe that Canelo Alvarez does too.
I don't think Canelo's gonna have to chase him.
So I'm not too worried about Terence turning into a track star when September gets here.